People ask what it's like to helm a dreadnought through a stellar nursery at 3,000ths of light speed for 6 months. I tell them it's a lot like watching paint dry, except the paint is radioactive and the wall is trying to kill you. That's the joke version. The truth is worse. The truth is that it's quiet and the quiet gets inside you, and after a while you stop minding it, and that's when you know you've been in too long. The Its Thornwall was a Farhold-class dreadnought, 1.6 kilometers bow to stern, blocky as a shipping crate and about as graceful. She was built to take hits in open vacuum and keep firing. Nobody designed her for what we were doing, which was threading her through the Calthorne Reach, a stellar nursery so dense with ionized gas and infant star matter that every sensor aboard read static from the moment we crossed the threshold. No comms, no navigation fixes, no external data of any kind. Just my hands on the helm, the inertial plots, and a set of gravitational gradient charts that the survey division had assembled from 40 years of passive observation, and exactly 0 first-hand transits. Nobody had crossed the Reach, not the 11 species of the Tessarine Compact on the far side, who had built their civilization on speed and had never needed to enter it, not any of the 3 powers on our side, who had mapped around it for centuries. The Reach sat in the middle of the chart like a hole someone had decided not to fill. Command wanted it filled. I was 26 when we went in. I turned 27 somewhere in the middle, though I only know that because the ship's clock said so. There was no sunrise in the Reach, no external reference at all. The hull cameras showed fog glowing, iridescent, beautiful for the first week and unbearable by the second month. The Thornwall's drives ran at 8%, which was the maximum the navigational models allowed without building a bow shock that would scatter the gas and announce us to anything listening on the far side. 8% in a Farhold-class dreadnought is a crawl, the kind of speed where you can feel the ship thinking about whether to bother. Captain Asham Merritt ran a tight transit, 4 watches, 6 hours each, no exceptions. I held second watch, midnight to 6, though midnight meant nothing in the Reach. Every shift I sat at the helm console and made corrections measured in fractions of a degree, adjusting for gravitational drift from forming protostars we couldn't see. The corrections were small. The consequences of getting one wrong were not. We lost a lateral sensor mast on day 94 to a particle strand we never saw coming. Took the mast clean off and scored the hull plating for 60 meters aft. Nobody was hurt. Chief Brannick's damage control team patched the breach in 9 hours and logged it as a minor cosmetic event, which became the crew's private term for anything that could have killed us but didn't. By month 4 the jokes had dried up and the silence had settled into the ship like ballast. People spoke when they had something to say, which wasn't often. The mess ran 3 seatings and most of them were quiet. I played 1,100 games of solitaire on my datapad during off-watch hours, won about 400. The rest I suspect I lost to inattention, but I logged them as draws because nobody was checking. On the 179th day, the fog began to thin. I noticed it first because my instruments didn't. The gravitational gradient was easing, the ionization count dropping by degrees too small for the automated alerts to flag, but large enough for a human eye that had been staring at the same readouts for 6 months. I called the captain. She came to the bridge in 4 minutes and stood behind my chair and watched the numbers without saying anything for 11 minutes. Then she said, "All stop in 2 hours. Weapons cruise to stations. No active emissions until I say." We stopped. The Thornwall hung in the thinning edge of the Reach and waited, because that's what we had been doing for 6 months and we were good at it by then. The fog cleared over the next 9 hours, slowly, like a curtain being drawn by someone who wasn't in a hurry, and on the other side of it, stars, clean stars, hard and sharp after 6 months of glow, and at 40,000 kilometers, 12 ships in a crescent formation, already pointing at us. The Tessarine Compact's perimeter response flotilla, 12 fast attack corvettes, each about 90 meters long, small, quick, built for interception speed. The kind of ships a federation of small species builds when it has survived for 3,000 years by being the first to detect, the first to respond, and the first to leave if detecting and responding don't work. They had known we were coming. Not what we were, the Reach's interference had kept our signature unreadable, but that something was in the Reach moving, and that it had been moving for months. Their perimeter array had been tracking us as a sub-threshold thermal anomaly since week 11. I learned this later during the formal debrief. Their analysts had filed it as a probable natural convection event, then refiled it as an unknown, then refiled it as a priority unknown. They had watched an object creep through a space no ship had ever entered, at a speed no ship would choose, for 123 days, and they had no classification for what they were seeing. The lead corvette fired a warning salvo at 03:17 ship time. 3 kinetic slugs across our bow, close enough to register on the hull vibration monitors. Standard interdiction protocol, I was told afterward. Anything emerging from a sensor-opaque region at speed gets a challenge hail. Anything emerging at our speed gets ordnance first, because nothing that slow should be that deliberate. Captain Merritt looked at the impact data on her display. Then she looked at me. Helm, hold position. I held position. I had been holding position for 6 months. I could do it for another minute. The Thornwall's forward point defense battery fired once, a single ranging pulse that hit the lead corvette's main drive housing and cored it. No detonation. No kill. The corvette went dark and began to drift. Her crew was alive. Her ship was not going anywhere. The other 11 corvettes broke formation. Scattered, the way fast ships do when something they don't understand hits harder than it should. They reformed in 8 seconds, credit to their training, and painted us with targeting sensors from 11 different angles. Merritt keyed the comms. Broadcast standard first contact package, all frequencies, include the compact trade frequency format. Lieutenant Commander Yancey at comms looked up. Ma'am, we don't have confirmation they use the trade format. They're a trade federation, Yancey. They use the trade format. They use the trade format. The hail went out. A structured data package, our identification, our origin, our intent, our crew count, and a request for dialogue transmitted in 9 languages nobody on the far side had ever heard in one format they recognized. The flotilla held fire. 31 seconds passed that felt like another 6 months. Then the lead corvette's backup systems came online, and she broadcast a single line in trade frequency format. Hold your position. We are holding ours. I held my position. The next 14 hours were the captain's problem, not mine. Merritt and the Compact's flotilla commander, a Tessarine officer named Verith Sull, who I met once during the formal exchange, and who was shorter than my forearm and vibrating with what I later learned was controlled fury, sat across a data link and built the framework for what would eventually become the Calthorn Accord. The corvette was towed home by her own wingmate. Nobody died. Nobody celebrated. The bridge crew rotated through their watches, and I played 6 more games of solitaire and lost all of them because my hands were shaking for the first time in months. Years later, I read the Compact's internal after-action report on the incident. Most of it was tactical. Ship mass estimates, weapons yield, drive signatures, hull composition. Standard intelligence workup. But the section that stayed with me was a single paragraph near the end, written by Verith Sull herself. She wrote that in 3,000 years of perimeter operations, the Compact had intercepted 412 vessels of 89 species. Every one of them had arrived fast at combat speed, at transit speed, at panicked retreat speed. Speed was the universal language. Speed meant intent, and intent could be classified, countered, survived. The Thornwall had taken 6 months to cross a space the Compact's fastest couriers wouldn't enter at all. It had arrived at rest. It had fired once to prove it could, and then it had stopped. And when the flotilla had painted it from 11 angles, it had not moved. Saul wrote that the compact had protocols for every speed, but not for stillness, not for a species that had crossed the uncrossable at a pace that suggested it had never once considered the possibility of needing to hurry. They called it patience. They filed it under a new heading. I'm 63 now, retired. I keep the helm console's calibration chip in a case on my desk, not because it's worth anything but because it reminds me of what 6 months of nothing taught me about the 1 minute that mattered. People still ask. I still tell them the joke about the paint. The truth is simpler and harder to say. I was good at waiting. I just didn't know it counted until someone on the far side told me it did.